Hello, hello, my fellow savages. We are back. I mentioned yesterday when I was recording that I had another topic I wanted to cover. There's actually a couple, but I'm so busy I can't keep track of them. So the one did keep track of is evil. Evil in the what do you the field of climate change. So this is an area of discussion. It's something many of us are doing, and um, I'm gonna have to do an audio check here in a second. Um, Maybe I should just do that right now. It's something we're all discussing. We all know that, and it's not showing up yet. Well, anyway, I'll have to take my chances that this is working. If you're in the chat, give me an audio check. Let me know if there's audio. Anyway, we're all in this field. We're studying this. Maybe we're studying it, the science and the scientific part of it. Maybe we're just interested in the sociology of it, right? What we're supposed to do, what people are thinking about it, maybe the politics of it. Okay. Well, we're all in this for some reason. You're on this channel. I'm doing this. You're doing what you're doing. And we're here for a reason. And it's called climate change, or rather, I call it global heating. Once again, you'd be lucky if all you got was some climate change, whatever that means, right? You don't even know what that means, but you are going to get some global heating. Okay. So there you go. Maybe you'll get some climate change. You will get some global heating. And by the way, the whole planet will get some global heating. And that's going to be a big twisted knot of a problem for you to unwind. And you're not going to. My guess is nobody's going to. However, there are people in this space who feel like at this point they have to try to unwind this. Global heating has driven people mad. That's the only way I can put it. It's an existential threat. And when people have gone their entire lives never having been stressed by a war or, pandemics, not the piddly one we just had, but like where half the people die, right? Your life hasn't been challenged by great existential crises where your existence is hanging in the balance. Okay. When for those people who have never experienced that, I've never experienced it. You probably haven't either. But to be honest, we haven't had those kind of crises anywhere on Earth in the last 70 years. I think if you were old enough to be through the First World War and you were in particular cities during the First World War, or you were a soldier, then maybe that was so violent and so cruel that you may have experienced an existential crisis. But for most of us, no, not so much. So for people who haven't had a level setting experience, like, okay, this is your daily problem, and then there's this. Okay, they've had their daily problems. Even global climate change has been a daily problem for them, and the IPCC process and the COPs and all the dithering and the dathering and the flapdoodle. But now the existential crisis approaches, because it is. And as that happens, there's going to be a group of people, probably early adopters, right? Probably people who have been really paying attention for a long time, who are at the risk of losing their minds because they weren't expecting in their lifetimes ever to be confronted with an existential crisis about this problem. When I was first learning about this 30 years ago now, 35 years ago now, the timelines that were being laid out for this were like hundreds of years in the future. That, yes, the greenhouse gases are accumulating in the atmosphere. We expect global heating, global warming, and they were calling it at the time global warming, to start to be felt or measured or recognized scientifically. And that will be in about 300-400 years, maybe 1,000. That was the conversation at the time. And I didn't have any basis for naysaying that, right? I'm a scientist, but this is not my field. So if someone says, oh yeah, it's going to be a problem in 1,000 years, then I have to think, oh, that's interesting, 1,000 years. Well, I guess we have plenty of time to figure it out. And I went on about my life and all the things I was doing. But here's what's happened. Okay, everybody who's my age or even a little younger, I'm 66, so you could even be 55, 50, and working as a scientist. We all heard this message that this is hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years out. Uh, Part of the reason for that was because we had data on what other climate changes looked like. Principally, we kind of knew how long it took the Earth to enter a glacial maximum and leave a glacial maximum for interglacial period. We knew about these things. We knew about the Milankovitch cycles, that they're tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years in cyclical repeat, and that the comings of a glacial maximum or the leaving of a maximum for a minimum, that would take tens of thousands of years, maybe even longer. So we were kind of primed by geology, which is the study of these ice ages. It's one ice age. It's glacial periods. The study, but everyone calls them the ice ages, right? It's one ice age which began about 3 to 5 million years ago, and so humanity has always been in the ice age, but there have been these glacial epochs, maxima and minima, where and humans have been through. I think the number I heard was two. We've been through two of these glacial events. So stop nerding out. Because of that, because the geology suggested the Earth changes slowly for whatever reason, we have a better idea why that is. We thought climate change caused by CO2 inputs into the atmosphere would take the same order of magnitude of time, right? 10,000 years, 1,000 years. It's just, you have to understand, it's just the zeitgeist, right? It's just the way people were thinking at the time. And even the entire field of geology, which is again where some of this news came from. The entire field of geology is all about steady state. It doesn't change. It takes a meteor impact to change anything. And so we we inherited that idea of stability and long-term change, and things take forever. Well, fast forward 20 years, maybe even less. We began to hear that, oh, actually, we could be seeing uh, real changes in the environment caused by climate change by the year 2100. Now, that's less than a century, right? That was news, but still, even 2100. Wow, I mean that's actually written in some of the earlier IPCC reports. Oh, and they would draw their timelines out, and they'd have dots all the way out to the year 2100. So they're just telling you we're looking at a time frame that's 21 the year from now to the year 2100. So that they were still pumping that into the zeitgeist. It's going to take a long time, folks. And then we started hearing about 10 years ago. We started hearing in papers and podcasts and TED talks. This may be happening sooner than we thought. The ice melt is happening faster than we expected. The Larsen A ice sheet and the Larsen B, they weren't supposed to disintegrate for 50 or 100 years. And they disintegrated like 3 years apart. And like in the year 1995 or something, right? Like a long time ago, they disintegrated. They weren't supposed to disintegrate until the year 2100. So here we are, right? And the news is getting bad. And we thought the year 2100, and then they started talking about, well, maybe the year 2050 we're going to see significant changes. And about the time they started saying 2050, I was already saying, you guys don't know what you're talking about then. You just don't know what you're talking about, because we're seeing changes right now. And they wouldn't talk about that. And any time that there was a significant change, the immediate reaction to it, and I'm criticizing the science community. I'm doing that. I'm a scientist. I'm criticizing the science community. You're just going to have to roll with me on this one, okay? I'm not doing this because I'm a denier. I'm not doing this because I'm a paid shill from the energy industry. I'm not doing this because I've drank the Kool-Aid and I tinfoil hat, flat earther, all this kind of crap. I'm telling you because I've seen this. This is what I'm watching. I'm watching this happen in real time out there in the science community. And they began sandbagging. Sandbagging, you'd have to look it up on the internet. I'm not sure where the term originated, but it means you know what's happening, but you're going to step back from it. You're not going to talk about it. You see it, no one else sees it, so you think it's safe for you to just back away from it. They didn't see that, did they? Okay, I'm leaving that one on the cutting room floor. So sandbagging is when you deliberately, this isn't as bad as it looks. This isn't a problem for a while. We kind of don't have to deal with this. So the scientific community has been sandbagging climate data, and not the data so much. They collect the data. They didn't sandbag their results. And there's lots of ways they do this. And there's lots of reasons they do this. I'm going to get to the evil part in a minute. Okay, spoiler alert. Doing this drives you crazy. Doing this sets up what we call cognitive dissonance. And it's like a liar who can't stop lying, because if they do, then the whole long lie unwinds and they become desperately, mentally, and desperately and emotionally, spiritually tied to this narrative that they've been weaving together. And it drives you nuts. Hence this video. So they've been sandbagging their own reporting of their own results since day one of this. Go back to the first IPCC report. It's there. And they don't, the way scientists do that. And it's a legitimate thing to do, by the way, but you have to be wary of what you're about to do. If you have a bunch of data and you've been collecting data for a year, and every day you collect data and it kind of goes along like this, and then there's a point up here, and then it drops down and it goes along like this, you might think, well, that's a little weird. What happened on that day? Hold on. Where did that data come from? Yeah, and then you start thinking maybe it's a typo. So you go back to your spreadsheet and you look around, and it's just, maybe I just moved a decimal, right? This data was 10 times more than this other data. Maybe I just didn't type it in correctly, probably. So you look at it and you look at, yeah, that may be it. Maybe it's just a typo. So you just take it out. It doesn't fit. It's called an outlier. Or maybe you don't take it out. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to do this mathematically. So you leave it in, and then you explain somewhere, this is an outlier. We're going to leave the dot on the chart, but when we do the average and discuss the other data, we're going to ignore this outlier. It's up there. And then we'll talk about all this other stuff. So maybe you just drop the data completely, or you talk about all the data that you think fits, or something like that. And so, and this is legit, because it's possible that when you typed it in, you made a mistake. When the intern transcribed data from all these logs and all these different charts and all these different readings, that they just missed a decimal place, or typed a 9 instead of a 6. You just turned it upside down in their head. It happens all the time. This is human error. It happens all the time. And when you have a lot of data that's kind of trending along, the outliers really pop out. Way down here, way up there. What is that? But you gotta be careful, people, because sometimes the outlier is a signal. It's a signal that maybe you don't know what you're doing. If you were looking at, say, radio astronomy data, and you're looking actually for alien radio messages, right? And you're going along and there's no message, no message, no message. And then there's something up here like this. Wow, what is that? And then it drops down. There's no signal. Okay, that actually happened in astrophysics. They were monitoring for alien communications, and they got a big signal, and it dropped off, and it went back to normal noise, basically. And they actually labeled that the wow signal. They actually said, wow, wow. That's not expected, except it was expected, because it's actually what you're looking for. So if you're looking for something that's supposed to be way out of average, then the wow thing is the thing. You don't just, oh, that's weird. Well, we'll just erase that one. That's the thing. And sometimes you're looking for the thing. But when you have this mindset that it takes ages for anything to change, then when there's a signal like that, you're like, oh, well, that can't be true, because it's supposed to take 1,000 years for this to change. So we can't have data like that, because that's what I think. We just can't. It can't be true. It's fine, except you always have to take a step back and say, wait, maybe that's signal. Now, if you have 3 dots of data and then it drops back down, you can't ignore it. You're like, okay, that's a bit odd. Now we have a scientific question. Why did it do that? Where were we? What day was it? What time of day? Did we come later in the day on that day than we had all the other days? Is all the other data morning data? And these 3 pieces of data are now evening data? Did we move our testing apparatus from one side of the lake to the other because it was flooding and it was easier to get to the other side? And so now we're over here instead of over there. And I've seen things like this happen. Some scientists, I've been in the field, and I can tell you, it matters sometimes where you go. And when we actually made a lot of effort to be very, very careful to always go back to the same spot. And it's not because, well, there might be something happening of interest over there, but it's because if you go to the same spot every time and you take the data and you're very careful and you log everything carefully and you have your peers with you and you make sure you're using the same machine at the same location, used in the same way to do the same thing, and you get a data point that's like out of reach, it's like off the chart, then you have to say to yourself, okay, that's probably data. Now, in climate science, I think they don't do that. They don't do that. And it has set up cognitive dissonance. Most of your climate scientists, I'm not going to name names, will tell you we have scores of years to solve this problem of global heating. We have centuries to solve this problem of global heating. And unfortunately, according to observations, which you don't even have to go outside if you don't want to, you can just read the headlines. You just read the headlines of what's happening in the world, observations, reading the headlines, and we're already in trouble. It's here. It's happening now. So people are scrambling around. And they thought they had generations to solve this problem, which means we don't solve it. A later generation solves it. Politicians have been playing that game, and scientists have been playing that game. Scientists have not been raising the alarm because they thought, because that's what we were taught, that we had hundreds, if not thousands of years to figure this out. So they didn't. And when things started to come unglued, they didn't raise the alarm because scientists don't do that. We don't raise the alarm. We just collect data and put it on our chart, publish it, and go get another grant to study something else. We don't raise alarms. That'll jeopardize your career. Another reason to sandbag. So because they had this cognitive dissonance and because they had an expectation that it was going to be thousands of years, and because it's a threat to their career if they start, sounding alarmist, they just didn't do it. And now we are in the jaws of disaster. And that's a fact. We are in the jaws of disaster. Could they have predicted it? I'll bet you somebody could have. I bet you somebody knew. Oh, yeah, somebody knew. And if they didn't know 30 years ago, when I was first hearing about this, then they knew when Larsen A and Larsen B ice shelves broke up. Then they knew. They had no excuse after that. Jason Box, glaciologist, was standing, I don't know, on the Greenland ice sheet being interviewed by a reporter, documentarian, whoever it was, maybe somebody following him around, recording his work for him, make a documentary. He said, "Yeah, basically we're fucked." He was standing on the ice sheet, and he knew what was going on Greenland. He knew, yeah, we're basically fucked. He never said it again, by the way. Of course not. Of course not. Why not? And what does it do to you when you don't? What does it do to you when a younger version of yourself realizes you're fucked, but then because of politics, reality, the social conundrums of university life, not rocking the boat, not being strange, not saying weird things. You kind of back away from that and you just focus on your career and writing your grants and getting your data and pushing forward the boundaries of knowledge. And you don't go back to that back in the past, you go forward. And, but what does it do to you? When one day you're a nobody and someone asks you, what do you think about this? You say, yeah, we're basically fucked. And then 5 years later, when you're somebody, right, you can't go back to that. What does it do to you? Now, I'm not saying that Jason Box is a problem. I'm saying that he is an example of the hoops that people have to jump through for their career and their advancement and their grants. And my theory is that as global heating and climate change and everything that comes along with it has advanced and moved closer and violated all of our expectations, and now it's not a fly here, and now it's not a 1,000-year problem or a 100-year problem, or this is driving me nuts, or a 2050 problem. It's a today problem. Predatory mind. Something's bugging me. So, whatever the reason, people that we should be able to trust appear to have lost their minds. And in the instant of losing hope, even if it was just the hope that this is not a problem now, it's a problem for future generations. That's a kind of cope, right? You're coping. That's kind of what I call it, hopium. That's a kind of hopium. It's not my problem. It's my future generation's problem, which is kind of cruel to say, well, I'll let them figure it out. But that for you personally, that's a cope. But when you don't have that anymore, when you can't say, when the data is not going to support this contention that it's in the future because the data suggests it's in the now, and that cope doesn't work anymore, and your hopium flow just got cut off, right? Then what happens to you? People become invested. And one of the things that people become invested in is the idea that this is someone else's problem. What we are now seeing coming from people who really, really want this to still be someone else's problem is we're seeing them, people who are intelligent, who have background in science and therefore mathematics, who rub shoulders with engineers and probably politicians as well. These are people that have platform. These are people that have written papers. These are people that get invited to TED Talks. These are people that get invited to congressional hearings and committees. When these people are now confronted with, wow, you mean I've been telling a lie all this time? Even if it's not their fault, but maybe in the back of their mind, they know maybe it is their fault, right? Maybe it is their fault. And when they realize it's all been a lie, a string of complicated lies that I tell myself, that I tell my peers, that we tell each other, that we tell the audience, that we write in the paper, that we tell our grants writers, it's just a long string of lies. None of them really meant to hurt anybody, just meant to kind of paper over the problem and let it be someone else's problem. And SCP, right? Someone else's problem. I get that from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? And SCP. It's an SCP. SEP, someone else's problem. So it's a problem to study. So it's still a problem. Global heating is still a problem. We have to solve the climate action, net neutrality, carbon pricing. It's still a problem. We got problems to solve here, people, but it's an SEP. It's someone else's problem. But then when it's knocking on your door, it's your problem. What do you do? I'm on here telling you it's a problem now. People are going to die starting tomorrow from this problem. People are dying already. We're probably going to undergo a massive die-off of the human species on Earth. And I can do a video explain that if you like. I've explained it at other places. But maybe it's time to revisit that topic. In any case, it's here. We're in it. We're not getting out of it. There is no way out. And so these people These people who have the platforms and the TED Talks and all that, they've had to come up with a way to make it someone else's problem. Even though the problem is now, the problem is here. It's on their doorstep. It's in their face. They still need to make it an SEP. How are they going to do that? The most, you can hear a lot of things, but the most common one I hear now, and the one you're going to hear a lot in the future, is called solar radiation management, or SRM. And the reason you're going to hear it is because it's an engineered solution, doesn't require anybody to change anything. You just live your life, write your papers, drive around, fly places, okay? You just live your life. Nothing changes for you. No carbon tax, no nothing. We're just going to do SRM. And you're like, oh, well, awesome. I'm ready for that. SRM, whatever that is. Okay, let me explain what SRM is and why it's evil. It is absolutely evil. And if you're all about that, you're like, SRM, wait, hold on. Hold on, Cougar. You can't say that's evil. That's the only thing that's going to save us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stick with me, buckwheat. Just sit through this. I'm going to learn you something. I am going to learn you to recognize evil and why you should care. SRM, solar radiation management. Why do we do this to ourselves? Solar radiation management. Solar radiation is just a 2-bit way to say sunlight. Why do they call it solar radiation instead of sunlight? I have a theory about that in a moment. Management, well, how do you manage sunlight? Well, you don't create more of it. You block it. That's the only thing we can do with sunlight. We don't increase sunlight. We decrease sunlight. And we do this all the time, by the way. Just a little while ago, I put on some sunscreen. That's helping me manage sunlight because, the UV radiation is going to cook my skin and give me another melanoma and all this kind of stuff. So that's SRM. And when I go back out, I don't have it with me right now, I'll put a hat on with a brim to protect my face from the sunlight. That's SRM. When you put a hat on and it shades your face, your head, that's SRM. If you go out with a parasol, it's right there in the name, parasol. Okay, sun. When you go out with a parasol, you're doing SRM. And when we plant street trees on the streets and we shade the sidewalk for people walking, that's SRM. That's all it is. It's just blocking sunlight, creating shade, however you want to say it. Creating shade or blocking sunlight. That's what SRM is. You're going to block sunlight. So why are these people, otherwise intelligent, and I'm sure perfectly good people, if you sit down and have a beer with them, why are they talking about solar radiation management? Because they realize we're fucked. That's it. We can't stop burning fossil fuels. And even if we did, we've probably already burned enough fossil fuels in the last 70 years during a time we could have stopped, didn't, but we have for 70 years kept burning fossil fuels. And because we did that instead of something else, now there's so much CO2 in the atmosphere, we're basically fucked. You can't remove it. And we can't even stop burning it. Right? I mean, look around. Do you see anybody stop burning fossil fuels? Do you see any nations or energy companies or the UN or anybody talking about, oh, fossil fuels? Yeah, that turns out to be a bad idea. We have to stop doing that. Okay, let's stop. We're all stopping now. Let's all hold hands and stop together. No, there's nothing like that happening. We signed the Paris Climate Accords, 10 years ago? And we were supposed to be slowly reducing our CO2 output. And we didn't do that. And CO2 output has actually increased. And our consumption of fossil fuels, surprise, surprise, has also increased. The only time it decreased was during the pandemic. And that was because people were home and factories were empty and nobody was buying and nobody was flying and nobody was driving. And so fossil fuel consumption decreased a little bit. And the atmosphere cleared up and you could see the stars at night and a whole bunch of things changed, right, during that brief period of time. But that's because we had to. And of course, it nearly destroyed the global economy. Brought us all these problems and all these political movements and all this tinfoil hattery about what caused the pandemic, and it was so bad, and it was deliberately trying to take away our freedoms and all this stuff because people were really upset that they couldn't go to work and they couldn't be in public places, and that was just a pandemic, and it just lasted a little time, and then when it was over, we could do anything we wanted to do, and consumption spiked up to the moon and took months for it to drop back down to normal. And it was temporary. The pandemic was temporary, and it only made a little bit of a difference. You could notice the difference if you're paying attention. And of course, if you lost your job or you couldn't fly or you couldn't, hang out in places you wanted to hang out, then you certainly noticed and you were maybe resentful and maybe later you stormed the Capitol. But it was short term. We would need to stop burning fossil fuels like that. More than that, not a small reduction, an enormous reduction. We'd have to do an enormous reduction permanently right now to have any hope at all of surviving global heating, to have any hope at all. We'd have to stop right now, full stop, immediate effect. And that might not do it. And this notion that might not do it is where people who actually know what's going on, like myself, start to think there's no way out. And if you're thinking that, but you have an investment in progress and there must be a solution to this, then you start scrambling around for a solution. It doesn't even matter how way out and far out it is. You just need it. You need it. Your brain needs it. You've been thinking all along, this is not going to be a problem for me or mine or anyone I know or any country I belong to or anything I buy or anytime I fly, or it's never going to touch any of that in my entire lifetime. Maybe some future people, but not mine. My brain's telling me I have nothing to worry about. I just have to research this. I have to get the data. I have to publish the data. I have to go to the TED Talks. I have to write the IPCC report, and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to be fine. And 30 years from now, someone else will be fucked. But me, but now we didn't slow down. We didn't stop. We didn't reverse anything. And now we're at 430 parts per million of CO2. And we're probably going to 450 on greased skids. Could get there maybe by 2030, the year 2030. And at 500 parts per million, we're done. We're just done. We might be done at 450. I mean, done means done. Massive die-off, probably at 450 parts per million. How do I know that? Hey, we're in big trouble right now at 430. And then there's a lag time. And of course, we can't stop burning fossil fuels. We'll need to burn more fossil fuels just to deal with the harm that's coming from the fossil fuels we've already burned. And it's just no way out. There's no way out. They're having floods. They're having fires. It's just obvious. Obvious what's happening. They're having nuisance flooding in Florida. They call it blue sky flooding. I mean, it's not raining, and there's no particular reason for this. They're having blue sky flooding in Florida so bad that they've had to install pumps to pump the streets, the salt water out of the streets. And now they're having blue sky flooding in parts of New York. I can't remember. New Jersey, New York. Anyway, it's a thing. So, thanks, Richard. So, Richard gave me an audio check. Thanks. So we know that it's kind of too late. We know that. And so people who can still think about this clearly and are not in denial, and they know it's too late, they have to come up with a solution. And the solution they're coming up with is solar radiation management. The idea is that they're going to block the sun. They're going to block the sun, and not at the street level with shade trees or giving everybody a free parasol, because that won't work. They're trying to keep the atmosphere from overheating. So to keep the atmosphere from overheating, not the people standing in the sunlight with a parasol, but the atmosphere itself, they have to block the sun at the top of the atmosphere. The sunlight is not allowed to enter the atmosphere. The sunlight is not allowed to hit the earth and do all the things that the sunlight does for the earth when it does that. And that's how they're going to save us from an overheating atmosphere. And this is so batshit crazy. This is so completely unhinged that I have basically lost faith in humanity over this one topic. Now, stay with me. I'm going to explain why this is batshit crazy. And everything I'm about to tell you All these things, all of them are going to have to be addressed by the people who claim that SRM is going to save us. For them, I understand why they're talking this way. It's a cope. They're suffering from cognitive dissonance. They've known all along, and now it has come home. And maybe they lied along the way, and maybe they ignored along the way, and maybe they kidded themselves along the way, and maybe they laughed, and they laughed it off, and they didn't pay attention. Whatever it was, they just had their head down, doing their papers, doing their TED Talks, doing their IPCC reports, teaching their grad students, teaching their courses, traveling to the Arctic, traveling to Greenland. They just kept writing the grants, spending the money. They just kept doing the thing, collect the data, publish the data, get the papers out there. Now we're fucked. They did all that. They did all that like this, like a robot. Just do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it every year. Do it again, every time. Just the same, always the same. And they woke up one day and they were fucked. We are fucked. We are really in trouble. We are in big fucking trouble, people. I don't know how to explain this to you. This is it. I mean, look around. This isn't going to last. None of this is going to last. Because 70 years ago, we didn't deal with this. Because 70 years ago, we thought it was going to be a 1,000-year problem. And 30 years ago, we thought it was going to be a 300-year problem. And 20 years ago, we thought it was going to be a year 2100 problem. And 10 years ago, we thought it was going to be a year 2050 problem. And now in 2025, we realize, uh-oh, it's a now problem. How did that happen? It doesn't matter how it happened. So they're going to block the sun. They're going to fucking block the fucking sun. Solar radiation management. That's what that means. Block the sun. How are they going to do that? Now, there are lots of proposals on how to do that. I'm not even going to list them. I'll list a few, right? Launch into space. Probably geosynchronous orbit, so way out into space. Gigantic reflective mirrors that bounce the sunlight back into space. That's one thing. Launch into space billions of smaller mirrors that just like hang out of there like a huge mirror cloud and bounces mostly radiation every direction except to Earth. Create a fleet of ships specially designed to travel around the planet on the oceans, spewing seawater into the sky to create artificial clouds. And the whiteness of the clouds will reflect sunlight back into space. Create a fleet of tankers, airplanes, jets, right? Big, whatever, 747s or something. Big tankers, big jets, whose sole purpose is to carry tanks of chemicals and fly way up into the atmosphere, and then constantly fly around the Earth, spraying chemicals into the way, way upper atmosphere to create a reflective layer of chemicals, and silicon dioxides or whatever they want to use, right? Silicon dioxide, that's sand. Sulfur dioxide that reflects sunlight back into space. Recently, we had an example of reverse SRM when they inadvertently decreased Earth's current reflectivity. And the way they did that, this is not real scientific, but this is sort of like, I think what's happening is that cargo ships starting like 3-4 years ago were required to burn bunker fuel that they use for their big diesel engines in a cleaner way, in particular to remove sulfur dioxide pollutants. And so as the ships go back and forth across the ocean, and there's lots of them, there's thousands of them, right? They reduce the amount of SO2 emitted into the atmosphere. Well, it turns out that may have reduced the existing, still artificial, mind you, but the existing reflectivity of the planet Earth. And people have been since saying, "Oh no, that was a big mistake. We should put the pollutants back into the fuel so they'll keep polluting the atmosphere." So, and all of this is just intended to block sunlight. Now you might think, well, blocking sunlight, if that would cool the planet, if blocking sunlight would cool the planet, then I guess that's what we should do because the planet's getting really hot. And that's obviously bad. We don't even need to think about that. That's clearly bad. Will the SRM save us from increased heating here on Earth? Maybe. Well, maybe we should try it. But it's insane. The entire conversation jumps over a dozen breaking impossibilities. First of all, just from a biological perspective, the life of this planet runs on sunlight. Now, human technology runs on fossil fuels. I get that. But the food we eat and the parts of the environment that we just visit, like the forests and the rainforests and the oceans, they get their energy not from fossil fuels like we do. They get their energy from the sun. All right, primary productivity. So if you start blocking the sunlight enough to make a difference in global heating, because that's your goal, right? You're not going to do all this just to say you did something, although there'll be people who do that, by the way. There'll be people who engage in various forms of geoengineering, including SRM, to say that they did something. And that's just politics, right? Well, don't point to me that there's a problem I didn't solve because, hey, I tried to do something. So then they could say, yeah, I'm special. But if we were as a species across all the nations to do something that would work, then it would, by necessity, block sunlight. So what does that do to your forests? What does that do to your crops? What does that do to the ocean ecosystems? You're blocking sunlight, and you're blocking enough of it to make a difference. So now you've clouded things. We've had natural experiments with SRM in the past. In fact, even recently with the eruption of volcano Pinatubo. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, sometimes volcanic eruptions can be so violent, and the nature of the underlying magma could be so heavy with things that can block sunlight, right? Like silicon, sulfur dioxides, and if the explosion is violent enough, very fine ash particles can be lofted high up in the atmosphere. That it can block the sunlight, and when it does that, the surface of the Earth gets colder, and also primary productivity goes in the toilet. We have had. You can look this up on YouTube. There's some documentaries. Unexplained summers that never happened. This is the meme, right? The summer that never happened. And sometimes it's 2 summers in a row that never happened. And back then, people didn't understand what that meant. How could you not have a summer? How could you not have a growing season, right? That's what we're talking about. That's all people cared about. They weren't going to the beaches in the medieval times. During the Dark Ages, they were trying to grow food. How is it that it never got warm? The frost kept coming and the plants didn't grow, and there was a blight, and there was everything else. And how could it be that we never had a summer? And of course, they were thinking it was God's wrath, and it was, frogs and salamanders falling from the sky and everything else. And it was a big mystery to them. Well, now we look back on those times, and they were frequently globally reported, right? The Chinese had a summer that never happened, and the Europeans had a summer that never was, and maybe even the Native Americans in North America reported that there was a time when we didn't have a summer. We still talk about it. It all happened pretty much the same time, within a year of each other. And what was that about? Well, it was something global, and it really happened, because it wasn't just someone's bedtime story they told to the kids. It really happened. Everybody was telling the same story of the summer that never happened. And they think it's hard to know because no one was paying much attention back then. They didn't have science. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have diddly, right? They didn't have anything. A volcano, volcanic eruption. Uh, what are I've enjoyed watching these documentaries because I enjoy the research that goes into decoding these things, what must have happened, and how they go about it. But right now, I can't tell you one of them that happened. Krakatoa blew up, and that was in fairly modern times, and they knew the effect that had. So they went looking for some of the other ones. Some of these volcanoes have never been found. It's been so long ago, and volcanoes tend to have short lives. Once they blow themselves to bits, even the crater that's formed often doesn't show up. Uh, that they couldn't even find the volcano. This is sort of inferring its existence because there's a layer of ash in the soil that seems to make sense. They look at tree rings, and the tree rings suggest that there was a year or two of poor growth, and there's this ash layer and a year or two of poor growth, and maybe there's some ice cores that suggest there was some ash in the air because they find particles in the ice layers, and they just kind of Sherlock Holmes this thing together. So we know that this can happen. We know that you can have, well, do you want to call it natural solar radiation management? The volcano didn't set out to do that. No one wanted it to happen, but it did happen, and it was able to cool the earth. So if we were actually to set out to cool the earth, we'd have to do something on a big scale, right? It would cool the earth. And remember, people noticed that something happened because the plants wouldn't grow, and it got cold, and there was ice, frost, and and when there shouldn't be, and all these things happened. And that's what they reported when they wrote their journals. So they wrote in the margins of their Bible, wow, today was really cold. Don't know what's going on. That's what we'd be signing up for. If we did serious SRM, we'd be signing up for all that. If you were actually trying to cool the planet or at least reduce the heating, yeah, you would notice. It would be obvious, or otherwise you didn't accomplish anything. And so when people talk about, oh, we'll just do SRM, nothing to it, huh? Ha ha ha. There's nothing to it. Well, yes, you're doing something. They're going to notice. And if no one notices, then you didn't do enough of it. So get back out there and do some more, right? You're managing the sun now, and that you signed up for that. And go back to the list of things I mentioned just casually. There's other people that had longer lists of all the SRM proposals, all the ways to do this. Go look them up if you're interested in it. But they're all enormous projects. Oh God. They are projects on the scale of our current project, which is called industrialization, global industrialized civilization. All the SRM projects are on the scale of what we're doing right now to cause the problem. All the cars, all the airplanes, all the factories, all the people, all the driving, all the flying, all the movement of goods. That scale is the scale at which we would have to do SRM. How the hell do you add another of this on top of this? Oh, and by the way, SRM is going to require, let's say it all together, fossil fuels. Now, when you find yourself deep in a hole, what's the first thing you're supposed to stop doing? Digging. Okay, when you're deep in a hole and you're wondering if you're going to be able to get out of that hole, the first thing you do is you stop digging. Well, if we go into SRM, we're going to have a project on the scale of industrialized civilization to save industrialized civilization from itself. And it's going to require industrialized civilization to pull this together. And what makes industrialized civilization go around? Fossil fuels. So you're probably going to double or some huge fraction of the current consumption of fossil fuels to do SRM. Furthermore, who's going to pay for this? Oh, well, we'll just sign a treaty and all the nations of the world will pay for it. Really? Well, will the Pacific Island nations that didn't do any of this to themselves, are they going to pay for it? are the developing nations in Africa or South Asia, are they gonna pay for this? How about we just point at the carbon that's sitting in the atmosphere? That's the problem. And how about if we put a label on every single carbon atom, okay? Theoretically, which we could do mathematically, by the way. We label every single carbon atom. And depending on how many carbon atoms up there are yours, that's what you pay for the SRM because you did it. You did this. And now you're saying we're going to do SRM. You broke it. You bought it. Because that's how that would work. All the nations in the world are going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. They're all going to do SRM. The fuck they are. The West is going to do that. Now, China came on board about 20 years ago. They burned a lot of fossil fuels to get where they are today. Okay, so some of those CO2 molecules are theirs. Okay, fine. The Chinese have to get involved. And of course, Japan and Taiwan. And okay, but how about the Philippines? Do they have to be involved? How about Indonesia? How about New Zealand? Are they involved? You can figure it out. We have records for this. You could do the fucking math in a spreadsheet. In Excel, you could do the goddamn math yourself. How many fossil fuels have been burned by these nations? For how long? And that's their portion of this. And you know who's going to pay for SRM for the entire fucking planet? You know who's going to pay for SRM? You know who's going to pay? You are. The United States of America, all of Europe. You can throw in China if you want to. Yeah, go ahead. Throw in China. That's fine. Who else? That's it. That's probably it. You're looking at it. So you're gonna have to write up a treaty where the United States of America, which doesn't sign treaties like that, and all of Europe, which is a bunch of countries that hate each other's guts, and China, who won't talk to anybody about anything, they're all going to write this treaty and they're going to sign this treaty and they're going to pony up the money to do SRM. Okay, whatever it costs. Tens of thousands of tanker airplanes spewing sulfur dioxide, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of dedicated ships at sea doing marine cloud brightening, billions of reflective mirrors at Lagrange points, right? 50 million miles away, whatever it is, we're going to pay for all that. We're going to pay for all that. And also, whatever solution you sign on your treaty and whatever amount of money you commit to that treaty, you're going to have to do that forever. Not for a week, not for a month, not for a year. Forever. Because that CO2 never goes away. And by the way, since you're layering on top of the current industrialized civilization, another effort of industrialized civilization just to apply SRM to the entire goddamned planet, you're going to increase the CO2 in the atmosphere all the time that you're applying your solar radiation management. You're increasing the CO2 in the atmosphere the entire time you're doing this. And so not only can you not stop ever, every few years you have to ramp it up. And then on the other side of that coin, are you then telling people, okay, we're going to have to burn all the fossil fuels we can get out of the ground just to manage solar radiation, sunlight? Okay, you people, you drivers, you flyers, you people working in offices, you people going to the IPCC conferences, all your groceries being shipped to all your grocery stores and everything else. I'm not going to take that call. That was supposed to be muted. You have to stop burning fossil fuels. Will people do that? No, they won't do that. They'll say, you're doing all this specifically so that you solve the problem. And we're not going to do this. We're not going to stop. You just said you solved the problem of global heating. That's my wife. I guess I got to take this. Hello? Fine. I'm doing a video. What do you want? Well, why don't you get home and we'll talk about it. Bye. She wants me to make lunch. That's good. I want to make lunch. Um, so the expectation is that SRM solves the problem of global heating. It doesn't. It doesn't remove the CO2, and it requires more consumption of fossil fuels just to keep the ships moving and the airplanes moving and the sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. And you have to do this forever. This whole thing is unhinged. Just because you can say, oh, well, we'll just manage solar radiation. Just because you can say it doesn't mean you can do it. And even if you could, even if you could just connect all the dots like I just did, here's the treaty, here's who's going to have to pay for it. Okay, it's not everybody. It's just the people who did it. Who's going to have to pay for it, right? Here's how long you have to do it. Here's the repercussions, meaning people have to stop driving and flying because we're just about to spend all of our fossil fuel budget driving and flying SRM, right? So, and this, all the sociological, societal changes have to happen, and all these things have to happen, and you can't get even one of those to happen. Not one. You couldn't get the treaty signed. And by the way, as I mentioned in the beginning, solar radiation management dims the sun. Now, there are lots of people on this planet who would tell you that dimming the sun for us, that's bad. I live in Norway. I don't get much sunlight as it is. My solar panels barely work. You start blocking the sun to reduce the global heating because you don't want to do anything else. And now you're going to block the sun. You're going to plunge us into winters that last 11 months out of the year. And then you got these paranoid people like the Russians and the Chinese who think that everything you do is a weapon. And if you start spraying shit in the atmosphere and you start sending up satellites to block the sunlight and you start doing all this business to save yourself from global heating, first of all, they don't give a shit about global heating, and they're probably making money selling fossil fuels anyway. And two, they think it's a plot, and they're going to come completely unglued. You just put something in the atmosphere over us to block the sunlight. You don't have permission to do that. Well, there's your treaty here. I didn't sign it. Well, you should have, because we're trying to save civilization. I don't care about your stupid civilization. You can't put things over my country blocking the sunlight. You can't do that. You're going to reduce my crop yields. You're going to reduce the effectiveness of my solar panels. You're going to reduce the biosphere in my area, my forests, my marshes, my ocean primary productivity. You're going to decrease my fisheries. You're going to decrease my crop yields. You're going to decrease everything because you're blocking the sun. And the sun is what makes this entire fucking planet go around. So no, you're not doing that. So you think you're going to do this. You think you're going to do SRM. You think you're going to get the Russia and the China and the Europeans and the Americans all to sign on the line. You think you're going to do that? You're not going to do that. And once everybody finds out, oh, you're going to block the sunlight, what's the downside to that? You better have your list, because if you don't have the list, yeah, things will be cooler, just like when Pinatubo erupted, except it's going to be continuous and it's going to be everywhere and it's going to be forever. It's going to be colder. That's the whole point, right? It's going to be darker. There'll be impacts on primary productivity, including crop yields, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to say, oh, well, you can't do that then. Well, but we have to do it because the planet's getting hot. And then they'll say, do something else. Because if you do that, we're at war. You can't do this. You can't do SRM. You can't do it. I mean, you can talk about it, and people will say, oh, thank you. You've solved my problem with global heating, because I'm not a denier. I believe that it's happening, and I know that it's approaching rapidly. And I don't know why the oceans are record hot, and I don't know why we're having record heat in Europe, and I don't know why these things are happening, but I'm not in denial, and we have to do something. You're going to do SRM, golf clap. Oh, thank you for saving me. Let's all go to the cheese bar, have wine, okay? Yeah. They'll agree to it, for certain definitions of the word agree, right up until you have, there's the treaty. You said you agreed to this. Okay, here's the pen. You're representing your nation or your group of nations. You sign right here. At that point, they're going to say, hold on. I might have some reservations about this. I need to take this treaty back to my people, and they're going to read this, and they're going to decide if we want to do this, because you're blocking the sun, right? And that's what this is, right? You're going to block the sunlight. Okay. Hold on. I know we have to do this to save ourselves, but I'm not sure what we're saving ourselves from here. So let me just take this back to my people, and we'll let you know. That's going to be your reaction, because blocking the sunlight as if there was a continuous volcanic eruption doesn't sound good to people, and they're not going to do it. And they'll agree to it in the abstract so they can get to the cheese bar and the wine after the talk, but they're not going to sign. And if you try to do it without their signatures, they're going to nuke you because you've just declared war on them. You're spraying chemicals. You've got gigantic mirrors out in space. You're flying bombers over their country, spraying some god awful whatever it is. You won't even tell us what it is, or if you're telling us, you're lying. For all we know, it sterilizes our males and makes our children, born with birth defects. We don't know what you're spraying up there. This is war. You're engaging in war. And maybe when you fly over your country, you're spraying sulfur dioxide. But then when you fly over my country, you're spraying something else. Who's to say? Who's to say what you're doing? We don't know what you're doing, so don't do it. So you can't do this. So what makes this evil? What makes this evil is that by having this conversation, we avoid the very important, critical, absolutely necessary discussion of what do we do now? Global heating is happening. It's real. It's not 1,000 years from now. It's not the year 2100. It's not the year 2050, and it's probably not even the year 2030. We're in it. Both feet up to our necks. We're in it. Well, now what? And when everybody says, yeah, global heating is real, and here's the data, and the ocean's record temperatures, and the polar vortex has never been more degraded, and we have a sudden stratospheric warming, and I say, yeah, now what? That's my comment. Oh, very nice, interesting. Now what? And that's what they're avoiding. Then now what? What do we do? The Titanic has hit an iceberg. There's water coming in. How much water? What kind of water? What's the temperature of the water? How big is the crack? Where is the crack? How fast is it flooding? Okay. And at some point you're like, all right, now what? And we're at that point. We got to get off. We got to get off of this. That's the now what. There's not going to be any SRM. And this conversation is evil because it prevents us from having the conversation we've got to have and that we do not want to have, that we will do backflips to get away from. We will back into the furthest corner of hell to not have this conversation. And the conversation is, what do we do now? Well, we write the grant and we get the data and we hire the students and we go out into the field and we get a ship and we get a helicopter and we fly to Antarctica and we do the ice cores, we measure the ice and we report the data and we publish the data. We get the publication, we get it peer reviewed, and then we get more grants, we get more students, and we do this and we do that and we do the other thing, we IPCC and we COP and we do all this stuff. That's their answer. Oh, and if that doesn't work, then SRM. That's their answer. This is crazy as batshit. This is as crazy as batshit. This is completely unhinged. We have lost our cotton-picked minds. We are completely insane. We know what's happening. We don't need to look at the crack in the fucking side of the fucking Titanic. We know exactly what's happening. We know exactly what's happening. There's enough data. We know. Oh, yeah. What we thought was we had 1,000 years, and then we thought we had 300 years, and then we thought we had 70 years, and then we thought we had 20 years, and then we thought we had 5, and now we don't have any time at all. Because the data. Now what? Now what are you going to do? That's what I want to know. Fine. I read your papers. I understand your data. I know what you're doing. I'm talking to you. I'm asking you a goddamn question. Now what? Well, I need to get a grant. I need to have data. No, you don't need more data. You stupid son of a bitch. Now what? Well, we need to do some SRM. No, you're not doing SRM. You're not doing anything of the sort. Now what? Well, you don't know. We can't. You couldn't even get a treaty that was signed by 100% of the attendee nations in Paris. You couldn't even get that across the desk of any leader to do anything about it. Donald Trump, as soon as he came along, he just opted out. Yeah, we're not doing that. And everybody basically didn't do it. So there's your treaty, and you're going to stop burning fossil fuels, or you're going to draw it down, or you're going to do something else and the other thing, and it never happened. So you're going to tell me that you're going to come along with a different treaty that all the major nations need to sign, that's going to cost them money, not cost them a commitment to maybe do something, cost them actual fucking money to apply technology, to build cargo ships, to build aircraft flying in this fucking stratosphere day and night, to spray chemicals into the atmosphere, to brighten the marine clouds or do something else. And you're going to pay for this how, and who's going to allow this? And you're going to do this for how long? Meaning thousands of years? Really? That's what you're signing us up for that? Because you'd rather not have the conversation. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's here. It's now. The place is, the whole goddamn planet's on fire. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? We have to do something. And solar radiation management isn't it. And trotting that out like some sort of a trick pony that we're just going to do SRM and getting everyone to golf clap. Oh, now let's go to the wine bar. You know, that's evil. You're the scientists. You're the engineers. You know what's possible. You know where we're at. You know what the data is. You know where we're headed. You know that things are bad are happening to us. You know this. And you're going to trot out up the SRM pony and get a golf clapper from everyone and then go to the wine bar? That's evil. I can't imagine anything being more evil than that. The planet is on fire. The house is on fire. And you're telling people, oh, just stay in your beds, stay in your rooms, don't worry about the fire. We'll do something magical to put the fire out. Don't worry. Keep driving, keep flying, keep consuming your goods from China, and just leave it to us adults. And you're just going to let them burn to death in their beds? That's what you're going to do? Rather than face up to the fact that there's an emergency and you have to get everybody out, the place is on fire and they need to get out and they need to be somewhere safe, and that's going to change their lives, and they can't go back to their prior life because now the house is on fire and they have to think about how they're going to live after this, and everything's going to change and everything's going to be gone and everything's going to burn up and they're not going to have anything, and everything they thought they knew that was forever and sacred and eternal just went kablooey. So you're not going to do that because that's another kind of problem that you don't want to face. So you're just going to leave them in there to burn to death? Yeah, that's the preferred solution now. Just let people think you've got a big solution, some magic thing that's going to come down and put the fire out, SRM or whatever the fuck it's going to be next week, and you're just going to leave them in there to burn to death. Rather than answering the question, what now? This ship is sinking. This house is on fire. What now? I'm putting it to you. We have to save ourselves. We don't have a choice. These people that are supposed to be on top of the data, on top of the things, have the models, and then the best they can come up with is SRM. Ask them. Ask them. What now? Excuse me. I got a question. If it's as bad as you say it is, what should we do? Ask them. Go on their Substack. Go on their YouTubes. Go on their Instagram and see what they're saying about this. So what should we do? Oh, well, we could do some SRM. It's just easy as that. Yeah, just spit it out there. Ah, well, we'll probably have to do some solar radiation management. It's a thing. We'll just have to do it. That's all. The fuck you will. You will not do that. You cannot do that. They won't let you do that. And even if you do that, you can't do it forever. And the first time you decide to stop, meaning you've got some other crisis that means you can't keep doing this, then all the CO2 that's still there and all that got added because of you fucking around with geoengineering, it's all going to come home to roost, and it's all going to happen in 90 days. Because that's how long your solar radiation management holds itself together. About 90 days, maybe less, maybe a couple of weeks. And then that shit's gone because you're not up there putting it up in the sky or putting it in the marine clouds or whatever kind of other fucktarded thing you claimed you were going to do for fucking ever at any amount of cost, because you can't stop. You can't stop because it got expensive. You can't stop because people got tired of it. You can't stop because people would rather spend the trillions of dollars you're spending on something else. You can't ever stop. You can't ever stop, because when you do, you get thermal shock. It just comes down on you, because now it's at 500 parts per million. It's at 550 parts per million. It's at 1,000 parts per million, because you've been dinking around with SRM. And on the day when all that falls apart for whatever reason, what, a plague, a pandemic, whatever it is, and you can't do it anymore, or you won't do it anymore, or they won't let you do it anymore, then we get thermal shock. Here we go. We get thermal shock in the year 2100, or we get thermal shock in the year 2050. So we're back. We're back on glide path, right? Okay, wait. I got a solution to the problem, because the problem is not that the problem is not that we're burning fossil fuels, because we have to do that. We can't stop doing that. So the problem is that the climate change and the impacts have hit us. We have no more runway. It's hit us. So what we have to do is buy ourselves some runway. So we do SRM, and that pushes back the real effects to maybe the year 2030. Or if we really go at it, hammer and tongs, maybe the year 2050. So we're back to this discussion. Oh, it's not a problem until 2050. But now you're spending $500 billion a year managing geoengineering, right? You're geoengineering. Just like the original problem was geoengineering, burning fossil fuels and putting the CO2 in the atmosphere. That was geoengineering. So now you're going to do two geoengineering projects. One, maintaining our sacred, forever, eternal ways of life, burning fossil fuels, and the other one, offsetting the harm caused by that way of life. So you have two huge industrial projects, one driving and flying your fat diabetic asses all over the planet, and the other one countervailing that. SRM. And we have to do this forever. And we can stop doing it after I retire, or after I die, or after, I'm no longer needing to my career writing grants and graduate students and all that stuff. When I retire, then you can stop doing SRM. But until then, I need all this to work the way it works. I need the IPCC, and I need the grants, and I need the government departments, and I need the NOAA, and I need the National Weather Service. And I need all this stuff. We have to keep all this moving. And I need people driving and flying. I need my Whole Foods full of exotic foods from all over the planet. I need all this stuff. And we're just going to do SRM. Somehow, somebody, some way, and somehow they're going to pay for it, and somehow it's not going to cause a war, and we're going to do it, and we're not going to stop doing it, except that we have to stop doing it. Then we don't stop until the year 2050, after I'm no longer part of the picture. And that's what they're doing. They're buying themselves personally some more time. Why? When you come along, you say, now what? Yeah, I've seen the data. I know what's happening. Now what? They tell you. They're thinking, the answer cannot be we stop burning fossil fuels. They're thinking SRM to buy themselves more time. And that's evil. That's evil. I can't imagine anything more evil than that. I'm trying to save humanity. No, you're not. You're trying to save your own personal lifestyle. Well, if I save my lifestyle and I save everyone's lifestyle, then we're fine. You're condemning us to thermal shock at some point when you can't do this anymore. Because even your SRM is going to require fossil fuels. And you're not going to tell anybody to reduce their fossil fuel consumption and compensation. You're just going to burn more on top of everything that we're burning now, for all the reasons we have to do that and that we can't stop. And when you layer an entire another industrial revolution on top of the current one, take the current one, double it, and put it right on top of the one we have now. And that's the SRM part. That's just the geoengineering. You took everything we do now, all of our emissions, all of our fossil fuel consumption, and you make a whole second tier of it just to manage the outputs from the first one, just to mask over that we've been fucking up for 70 years. You can't do it. And when they tell you that's what they're going to do, they're lying to you. Why are they doing that? Why don't we just have the conversation? We fucked up. We knew 70 years ago it was a problem. And we certainly knew in the 90s it was a problem. And we've had all these IPCC reports, and all of this data has come in, and our data gets better and better and better. Wife is home. And all this, and we've known, and we didn't do anything, and we just allowed it to get worse. And now you're going to trot out some magic. Yes, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to do a magic act, and you're going to believe them, because for most people, that's the right answer. a magic, a miracle. A miracle will happen. And it's terrible. I don't know what's happened to people. They lost their minds. People lost their minds. They can't imagine a world that doesn't have them in it doing what they're doing right now, burning fossil fuels. They can't imagine that world. So they just make up imaginary solutions. And you can be convinced that it's the right thing to do. And that puts you in the camp of people who can't face the reality, which is that we made a big mistake. We're still making the mistake. We haven't stopped making the mistake. And we're not going to stop making the mistake. And all we're going to do is convince ourselves that somewhere down the road, there's a magic solution that's going to cover for the fact that we've been making and still make a mistake. We must leave fossil fuels in the ground immediately. And no, that won't save us. I wish it would. If it would, I would say so, but it won't. But we have to do it anyway. We have to leave fossil fuels in the ground, period, with immediate effect. And that's going to be painful. And that's going to cause a 99% die-off of humanity. And I know that. I understand that exactly. We have to do it anyway. It's what's called a wicked problem. We've created a wicked problem. We didn't have any help doing this. We did it ourselves, to ourselves. And now we have to take the painful measure. And the SRM is not going to save you. Not only can you not do it, if you did it, it wouldn't save you. It wouldn't. It's just masking the problem. Like finding out that your arm is gangrenous, and so you just start wearing a long sleeve shirt and a glove. Well, I can't see it, and I can barely smell it, so I guess it's okay. That's magical thinking. That's where we're at right now. Magical thinking. We're going to cover up this gangrenous wound with a gauzy bandage and call it good. So I'm done. Gotta cook.
The most important message is get to the lifeboat and meet your neighbors and create a village. You can always remind people of that. We have to do that.
Well,
to live without fossil fuels.
Yeah, that might be another video because we have to do something. And what we have to do is stop burning fossil fuels.
Right.
And the planet has to do that. And that will happen one way or the other. Right. And when that day comes, you're going to die. Right. Because you are completely dependent on fossil fuels 100% of the time for 100% of what you do. Right. And on that day, if you are still dependent on fossil fuels, which is hard not to be, but if you are, then you have no narrative, you have no story about how you're going to survive. And yet we have to stop burning fossil fuels. And the SRM is not going to save us.
And get to know your neighbors and build a community.
Maybe you should do a video.
No, just saying, because even what's his name was saying that. He was just talking about the great simplicity and, how important the Dunbar number of meeting your neighbors. And you say that, build a village. That's all I'm saying. It's to build a village.
Getting to the lifeboats looks to me like village life. And village life looks nothing like what we're doing now. I'm writing a book about village life. It's called It's Been 100 Days. And in 100 days, they do a reasonable job of reproducing village life. They, meaning a fraction of the population, is able to pull that off. And it's almost done. It really is almost done. And when it's done, I will come on here and I will do a reading. It's long. It's like 250 pages at this point, but I'll just read it. Whatever. I'll just sit here and just do that. And you can all learn how it is you make a village and how you have to do that within a few weeks, and then you have maybe 100 days to finish that process. We are in deep trouble. We are in a very bad place. We are in a place of dying, and that is something to avoid, I think. All right, time for lunch. Talk at you folks later.